step towards peace or an admission of defeat? Emirati forces announced they're winding down their role in Yemen after 4 years of war. I'm Imran Garda, and today on the Newsmakers we ask why the UAE wants out of Yemen. The UAE is a military linchpin in Yemen, a crucial component of the Saudi-led coalition, providing thousands of ground troops, weapons and financial assistance as they fight Iranian-backed Houthi rebels. Now the Emiratis say they want to wind down their involvement in one of the Middle East's most brutal wars. Abu Dhabi says it's shifting from a military-first to a peace-first strategy. But what does that really mean? Yemen's war has created one of the world's worst humanitarian catastrophes, forced millions into poverty, and drawn widespread international condemnation. So, is this more about saving the UAE's reputation than pushing for peace? And how will Saudi Arabia react to their coalition partners' decision to withdraw? Haider Abbasi reports.
The war against the Houthis was expected to be easy. But 4 years on, and Saudi Arabia and its allies are still fighting the rebels. One of those allies is the United Arab Emirates. It's been crucial, providing funding, training and thousands of troops. The UAE has also led major battles in Yemen. But now the Emiratis are leaving. Well, almost. UAE officials say they're pulling out most of their troops. The number of Emirati soldiers stationed in Yemen isn't known. According to Emirati officials, forces have withdrawn entirely from a military base in Kokka and partially from the port cities of Hodeidah and Aden. So why is the UAE scaling back? The Emiratis say they're shifting from a military-first strategy to a peace-first strategy. Analysts say Abu Dhabi wants to support the ceasefire in Hodeidah, which requires both Houthi and pro-government forces to leave. The Saudi-led coalition has been trying to restore the UN-recognized government of President Abdrabbu Mansour Hadi. The deal to evacuate the port city was agreed during talks in Sweden last year. And the Emiratis say they're not leaving a vacuum in Yemen, as they've trained 90,000 fighters. The war in Yemen is seen as a proxy battle between Saudi Arabia and Iran. When the conflict began in 2015, Riyadh said the operation would be over in months. But despite the combined military forces of Saudi Arabia and its partners, Houthi rebels still control most of the country, including the capital, Sana'a. And the cost has been devastating. The UN has classified Yemen as the world's worst humanitarian disaster. Around 70,000 civilians have been killed and 14 million are starving. So has the UAE realized it can't win the war in Yemen and is trying to save face? Will the Houthis take advantage of the Emiratis pulling out? And could the withdrawal strain relations with Saudi Arabia? Haider Abbasi, The Newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this, I'm joined now here in the studio by Saudi and Gulf Affairs expert Mohammed Al-Kubayban. In Allendale, Massachusetts is Jamal Qasim. He's an associate professor of Middle East Studies and Political Science at Grand Valley State University. And Ibrahim Qatibi is a political analyst and human rights advocate. He's also the co-founder of the Yemeni American Coalition for Change, a group that wanted the end of Ali Abdullah Saleh's presidency. Interesting to find out what your current views are right now, Ibrahim. Let me start with you, though, Mohammed Al-Kubayban. It seems as if the UAE is pulling out of Yemen, winding down. Has this come as a surprise to you?
This is not true. Are they pulling out? No. The reality is we have to look at it as a military actions. Okay, if the source you've heard, I did not find who is the official one talked about that the UAE forces are redeploying back. But
they've directly quoted. Officials have directly been quoted that they're shifting from a military-first strategy to a peace-first strategy. And the best available evidence on the ground has shown that they are moving their own troops out and prefer to empower their allies on the ground, whoever that might be, militias and so on?
It doesn't come up with the military to the peace while there is another military action is going on. We are a coalition. You get my point?
Right.
So it has to be all in one flow, or either in the wartime or in the peacetime.
So that's why I'm asking you, is it a surprise that they are making these moves?
But again, what I'm saying is the official person, I contacted many UAE friends. Okay, nobody told me who's he. But we look at the picture, how is it? So what's happening exactly, what I thought, that now it's the time for the national army in Yemen to take over. Honestly, we've heard some noises or some voices coming out that there is no enough support from the coalitions. We've been stopped from moving forward towards Sana'a, toward other places. So honestly, what I was looking for is this time where they take over the fight. First, reason why we need to stop the UN intervene, because if it's Yemeni conflict, I think that they have the right to go and fight. Either the let's say the international community will go with their vision, or they have the right to fight against who is kidnapped their area.
Okay,
So,
but just coming back to the beginning, do you believe that the UAE is now leaving?
not exactly,
Okay,
sir. It's
okay.
repositioning.
Repositioning, okay.
Repositioning.
Strategic and tactical.
Yeah, and as you heard, that they are having almost 90,000 soldiers being trained to take over, so there will be no vacuum.
I see.
So this, and by the way, this being well coordinated with the army and with the coalitions, the headquarter coalition. So, and this, by the way,
But you're saying
is
well
almost
coordinated. We're at a point where high estimates say 100,000 people have died. We have 250,000 people who are displaced. We have millions of people in need of food aid. And one of the key partners of the coalition is making moves to leave. It doesn't sound like things are well coordinated. It sounds like they're cutting and running.
No, sir, it's not this way. I mean, we've been working with the UAE forces and the coalition. I'm still saying it as a coalition, close contact to each other. So repositionings, I think it is one of the military tactics.
Okay.
And the reason for that, what I'm saying is, we need the Yemenis national army to take over and just to keep the support.
Okay.
This will help more, what I believe, political-wise, for the conflict to be over.
Jamal Qasim, what do you think is going on here? Are we seeing a split between Riyadh and Abu Dhabi when it comes to how they handle this war?
Thank you first for having me in your show. And I think I might disagree with my brother Ibrahim on that this is just like a matter of tactic. I think maybe United Arab Emirates is seeing something that, about its involvement in the war that Saudi Arabia may not agree with. I think United Arab Emirates is drawing down its troops in South Yemen, especially in seaports such as Makha and Al-Khouka. And now we have seen actually in the last few days that Saudi forces are trying to replace the Emirati forces in these areas. So from the very beginning of the war, we have seen that United Arab Emirates almost has different kind of political goals when it comes to its involvement in Yemen. Unlike Saudi Arabia, which is more concerned about the rise of the Houthis and the Iranian threat to its national security from Yemen, coming from Yemen, we have seen that United Arab Emirates has almost different political goals.
Okay,
United
and what
Arab
are
Emirates
they?
from the
Jamal,
very beginning, from day one.
Sorry to interrupt you, right? Just to be absolutely clear. What are those goals? Do they support the southern separatists? Is that the main issue here?
Yes, to support the southern separatists. Actually, United Arab Emirates from day one and work very diligently to undermine the government of the legitimate government of President Hadi. They supported the secessionist movement. The 90,000 troops that my friend Ibrahim mentioned. I'm not sure if they are parts of the national Yemeni army. It seems to me like these are the militia they trained in the south parts.
Right.
And this is basically creating more political instability and security instability in the south. In addition to their ambition to take over some of the important Yemeni islands like Socotra, which actually resulted in the resignation of the former Prime Minister Ahmed Ibn bin Dagar.
Okay, and just a point of clarity, the man who was speaking earlier was Mohammed Al-Kubayban, who's in studio with me. Ibrahim Qatibi, I'm going to go to him now. Ibrahim, is Jamal accurate? Is he saying that fundamentally, no problem. Is he accurate in saying that fundamentally the Emiratis and the Saudis, while they both don't like the Houthis, they both don't like Iranian influence, they both broadly maybe support the Hadi government. As the war has ticked along, they have developed very different interests here, and now we're seeing that play out. Is that what's happening?
So just to be clear, what's happening in the southern part of Yemen, where the Saudi-led coalition, the Saudi UAE-led coalition is controlling or occupying, is that, one, what they did, they only using the legitimate government card as a cover-up. They're not doing anything to support the legitimate government. In fact, they're doing the complete opposite. So when the Emiratis officials are talking about training 90,000 soldiers, what they really saying, they actually trained many local militias all across the south under the name of the Southern Transitional Council. And that's a complete disaster, not only for Yemenis, but also for the region security and peace. So the thing is what's happening since the beginning of the war in 2015 is that instead of the coalition helping the Yemeni government to go back to what are called today the liberated land, what they did the complete opposite. They trained local militias to undermine the government itself. They occupied the Yemeni lands, airports and seaports, and also the islands. The Socotra Island, one of the most strategic island, in the Arabian Sea, is controlled right now by the Saudi Arabia and the UAE, but not the Yemeni forces. There is a serious problem here that needs to be exposed. One, all across the south, what they did, I'm talking about the UAE and the Saudi coalition, create secret detention, support the separators to take over the south. And just to be clear, they're not helping people in the south so they can gain a southern state. They supporting them to undermine the legitimate government, but at the same time, so they can stay occupying that strategic location in the world. Yemen is in a geopolitical strategic location, which is exactly what they're trying to occupy.
Mohammed Al-Kubayban.
30 seconds, just 30 seconds. Ibrahim, nice to see you, by the way, and Jamal, both of you, nice to see you both. Ibrahim, now the conflict has been almost 4 years, okay? Don't tell me that with whatever help that the coalition did, there was nothing in favor of the government or for the Yemeni side. Now, some goals has to be changed. Some goals has to be changed due to the change of the strategic, let's say, rise in the country. Now, I don't agree with you with that the Saudis and the Emirates looking to separate Yemen both sides. No, sir. What I'm saying, the military act is now taking over. Leave the political side. If the UAE did not train, and if the Saudis not support, and by the way, it's by approval by the Yemen, we will see a complete disaster in the southern side. You knew the Al-Qaeda was there. You knew, sir, Daesh is built up. But what I thought that the UAE trying to terminate what's happening due to the conflict. So what I'm saying,
isn't it already a disaster? You're saying if they weren't there, it would be a disaster. I mean, we're looking at the facts here. This is
no, sir. This is a war. I agree with you. There is, by the way, the conflict inside the Yemenis themselves did not help that we get over with the war. Due to some parties, they want to take over. And I'm not saying that the Yemenis they are not happy with the case. No, they are all unhappy, and we are not happy too. We see the rise of the Iran arms in the area, so it's getting difficult. But right now, what I'm saying, I don't agree with Ibrahim when he's saying that the militia is being built by the UAE. Sir, there is a couple of ministers talked about that if those military trained are not in ground, it will be real disaster due to the conflict, due to, it's a chaos.
Sure, Al-Qaeda is there, Daesh is there as well.
So it's a chaos.
But they're
Somebody
saying that
will
these
take
are
over the
militiamen
chance.
who aren't necessarily good for the security of the South. Let me bring in Ibrahim
No, but
to respond.
militia word itself shouldn't be mentioned there. Militia is people not having a green light. All UN is against, all legal country is against word militia. So militia is a bad word, in fact.
Ibrahim, these are not militias, these are legitimate fighters. Respond.
First of all, that's a misleading argument. The government itself know that these militias are outside the legitimate government and the forces locally. Beside the point, I don't think they're there to fight the Iranians and the Houthis. That there is evidence that they no longer fight in the Houthis and the Iranians and Yemen. So it's not true that they're there to basically fight them. What do you see right now today, all across the country, is that the militias that are supported or loyal to the UAE and Saudi Arabia is stopped at the former borders between the north and the south. So they no longer fight. Second, if you're there to help the Yemenis, you're supposed to lift up the blockade. You know, every day the Yemeni plane, civilian plane, is trying to land, and the Yemeni land, and they wouldn't authorize the Yemeni plane to land in its own land. It's not allowed. They're not doing anything to help Yemenis coming in and outside the country. The government itself, the president 5 years later is still detained in Saudi Arabia. The whole entire cabinet is outside the country. So tell me, if you have supported local even the military, why the entire government is still outside the country 5 years later since the beginning of the war?
Okay.
This is the nonsense, misleading
let's get Mohammed to respond
argument.
to that. Mohammed?
Yeah, remember, sir, we ceased fire due to the Sweden agreement, okay? And everybody agreed that let's terminate fire. As far as what Ibrahim was saying, the fight was stopped. So that's step one. Step two, we have to give it a time. I mean, it's not only stop firing, stop fight.
We're not a trial. We're not going to wait 10 years for them to do a complete.
So what is
Hold on.
Ibrahim,
Mohammed's going to finish his point, and then
what
Jamal
I'm
can come in.
is the Hudaida agreement or the Sweden agreement plays a big role there. Okay, the case or the situation of the civilians is real disaster, and we know what is the Houthis are doing with the foods, with the fuel, with the medicine. So I think what decisions being made is good and strategic decision to cool down the fight to see what's going on. Now these days we see there is the communication or the meetings start today. I think they went down the sea and they have a meeting with Mr. the two-star general, and they will reestablish the speech regarding the Sweden agreement. This is number one. For the government detains and what people are saying. Honestly, I don't recommend that the government goes to Yemen in this situation.
Okay.
I agree.
I would love to ask
This is for
Hadi
the safety.
himself.
Yes, sir.
I would love to ask Hadi himself.
You knew, sir. Whatever it is, the security is not being established yet. And it's important for their safety and for their security. And you knew the Iranians are looking for any chance that happens to the government. Right away, they will explode those chances.
Okay, let me get Jamal to
real
come in.
Disaster.
Okay, Jamal, come in.
I would like to respond to Mohammed's points about, this is not militias, this is part of the unifying army, actually. They are not under direct command from the unified Yemeni army. So this, we all know that these are just militias built to basically advance the causes of the secessionist movement in the south. But we need also to be fair that United Arab Emirates in South Yemen or in Yemen in general is different from Saudi Arabia. As it says, Saudi Arabia came to eliminate the Iranian threat, to eliminate the Houthis, the Houthis control of Sana'a. Also, by not allowing the government of President Hadi to come back to Aden, regardless of the security situation there. It is a government, of war. It should be running the country from the grounds of these war zones in Yemen. It cannot be running the war or running the government from
Jamal,
Saudi Arabia
the position
or from Riyadh.
has nothing to do with it. Jamal, just 1 second. Position has nothing to do with it. We are in sophisticated communication when they can talk. No, I didn't think so. This is a valid point. But what I'm saying regarding the militia, Jamal, we knew who's the militia. Hezbollah is militia. Houthis is militia. Al-Hashd al-Sha'bi back in Iraq. Those are the militia. When you say the Emirates making militia, they will have a penalty from the whole international. So we have to be careful. You could say they trained some Yemenis. They work for the coalition. I may buy this war.
You are creating more warlords in Yemen actually than solving the problem. I will tell you, if this war is stopped now, Yemen is going to be basically in a total civil war because you are creating different militias. It is not under unified command, military command.
No, who said so?
No, it's supposed to be under the leadership of Hadi because he's the commander-in-chief.
They are well trained. The
weapons
weapons they have is being transferred with the factories, with the government provided the weapons. So they are not militias. I completely disagree with you. Making a lord of the war, again, maybe Jamal, I completely disagree. Share with you with your ideas.
If you look,
the situation in Yemen, especially in the southern part. Let me finish.
The
Jamal, 1 second.
in the south are not under the direct control and under the direct command
Mohammed
of President Hadi.
You believe, okay, so Mohammed Al-Qubayban believes that they cannot be... Jamal, Mohammed Al-Qubayban believes that they cannot be under the direct control of Hadi right now because that's not where we're at in the war right now. And got it.
Yes,
point
sir.
noted. Point noted.
Yes,
Let me just wrap things up here because we're out of time. This is an interesting discussion and interesting development. And it's the first time in a while that we've had this discussion, which isn't purely coalition on the one hand and Houthi on the other. This looks at cracks within those who support Hadi. And I think this is a fascinating development, and we're going to have more discussions about this as we move forward. But for the moment, I have to wrap up, and I have to thank you all, gentlemen. Mohammed Al-Qubayban, Jamal Qasim, and Ibrahim Khatibi. Thanks for joining us on the Newsmakers. For hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of Shia Muslims in Nigeria, Sheikh Ibrahim al-Zakzaky is an inspirational leader. But he's been detained for the last 3.5 years, ever since a raid on his home where he was arrested. A crackdown followed, and more than 300 members of Zakzaky's Islamic Movement of Nigeria were killed, including 3 of his sons. To this day, the Shia cleric remains in detention, charged with murder and breaching the peace. But is he being targeted because of his beliefs? For decades, he and his followers have had regular run-ins with the country's government. In fact, Nigeria's National Assembly was forced to go on lockdown last week after police clashed with Zakzaky's supporters who were demanding his release. But Buhari's government doesn't seem to be budging. Let's find out why. Well, joining me now in Abuja is Deji Adeyanju. He's a human rights activist who says he's been detained multiple times by the government. Also in Abuja, we have lawyer Daniel Bwala. He's a former Senate candidate that ran for the ruling All Progressives Congress Party. And in London is Kayode Ogundamisi. He's a Nigerian affairs analyst and was a member of Muhammadu Buhari's 2019 presidential campaign. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Deji, Sheikh Zakzaky's ongoing detention, is it justified?
It can never be justified because under our laws, it is clearly stated that every human being, every citizen of this country shall not be deprived of his rights except on the order of valid court or in execution of the judgment of the court. Contrary to this provision of the Constitution, Sheikh Zakzaky has been detained since December 2015, that's close to 4 years now, unlawfully by the Nigerian government against valid court orders, which contravenes all the provisions of Section 34 up to Section 50 of our Constitution. So the continuous detention of Sheikh Zakzaky is in direct violation of the laws of our country. So it can never be justified.
Right. So Daniel, what we're hearing from Deji is essentially Sheikh Zakzaky is a political prisoner here. Is that how you see it?
No, I don't see it that way. Even though I agree in part with the submission of the last speaker, citing the constitutional provision that nobody can be unjustly or unlawfully detained unless by an order of the court. But there is also a dimension called the national security dimension, which I know even in England, after the wake of 9/11, when the UK citizens that traveled to spots they call the trouble spots for terrorism were restricted from coming back to England, the matter went to court. And the court, I think the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom, or one of the courts in England, gave a judgment that under the given situation that the right of citizens of the United Kingdom can be restricted temporarily until the government
Daniel,
is able to deal with the
so
situation.
allow me to come in here.
So I believe that sometimes
so
there are national
certainly.
security issues that can...
Right, so Daniel,
go ahead.
you're trusting the government to make that call, right? 3 years ago, the Nigerian army had a report, an intelligence report, that linked this group, the Islamic Movement of Nigeria, to Boko Haram. Boko Haram are Sunni Takfiris. They hate these guys who are Shias, right? So if you have intelligence coming and linking these two who are diametrically opposed on a theological level and a political level, doesn't it make us question the intelligence of the intelligence services?
Well, let me say it this way. I do not have these facts that you have just said. I need to be able to read it and interpret between the lines what the report actually said. But I know for a fact that in the intelligence world, you can do your assessment and give a preliminary report pending the final verification or final investigation over a matter. I cannot, while talking to you right now, say that this sect can be linked or are linked to Boko Haram. It is a fact that I know that there is a Shiite sect under the Islamic law, even though the governor of Kaduna, the state where this incident happened, said that this particular movement is different from the original Shiite that we have. They said there are three types. There are those ones that believe in the government of the federation, respect the president, believe in the constitution, and obey constituted authority. But his argument is that these ones, the movement, they do not regard the constitution of Nigeria, they do not respect the president of the Federal Republic, and they do not obey the laws of the land. Okay. And let me say that, Imran, they have been protesting, and it is their right to protest. And nothing has happened to them for all these weeks and months. They have been protesting until these few days ago when they resorted to violence before there was a clash. So it is the right of every citizen of Nigeria to protest. It is their constitutional right to express their opinion, but the expression of the opinion must be within the ambits of the law.
Kayode, is this a legitimate group with legitimate demands who's being unfairly treated, or is it a dangerous group?
Every Nigerian has a right and freedom of association, freedom to practice their religion. And there are more than 600 religious practices in Nigeria. As a matter of fact, this is not the only minority Islamic sect or movement in Nigeria. There are thousands of minority sects across the country, and they practice their religion without hindrance. This particular group have not covered themselves saintly. They have inhibited the movement of citizens. In Kaduna State, they've built a sort of republic for themselves. They do not believe in Nigeria. But having said that, it does not justify the long detention of El Zakzaky, even if the law permits the government to keep him. And let me quickly point out that it is not just this government that has done this. Zakzaky had 9 children. He's lost 6. 3 to previous government before this government and 3 to this government. So there is an history of violence within this movement, and it is not just the government alone. Both sides have issues to answer.
Okay, so Deji, when we look at some of the teachings of the movement, they do believe in Vilayat Faqih, they support the Iranian Revolution. Some of the comments that have come out of the group seem to suggest that they would like something similar in Nigeria. That's unlikely to happen, but do the other two gentlemen make a good point that when you have a group that rejects the constitution and doesn't want to accept the rules of the political game in the society that they're living in, then you have to be cautious when it comes to them?
I would like to take a very different view from them. I disagree with them completely and in totality, and I want to make it very clear that the first speaker was economical with the truth. when he said that that you can detain, the government can detain people, you know, for as long as they so choose with the doctrine of national security. That's completely wrong. And I would like to cite the case of SSS.
I never said that. I never said that.
That case was decided, and the Supreme Court held that no government has the right to unlawfully detain any Nigerian citizen based on national security, on the doctrine of national security, without recourse to the court. And the Zakzaky case is quite similar with that of the Sambo Zakzaky case, where the president has become the accuser. He is also the judge and the jury in that matter. He has found Zakzaky guilty, and that's why even the Attorney General of the Federation has recently said that they will not be released in contravention of valid court orders. So it is impunity taken too far. Secondly, on the issue that Kayode raised, I would like to just react simply by saying that it is also not true. Because you cannot say that this group does not believe in the Constitution or the federation of the country, when in fact this group, when the army killed over 1,000 of them in what has been tagged by even the Amnesty International as extrajudicial killing and genocide, mass murder. This group did not react, they did not retaliate, they did not take up to arms like Boko Haram did.
Right.
When
I don't know if Deji listens to the. I don't know if
This group
Deji.
went to court.
Okay.
This group went to court.
Okay.
They went to court to challenge
So Deji,
the
okay, so
unlawful
Deji,
killings
so
of their members.
Deji, hold on,
And when
gentlemen.
they went to court,
Okay, so
the group got 4 judgments in court.
I don't know.
4 judgments in court.
okay, hold on,
Deji's
gentlemen. Hold on.
mixing up
Kayode,
the
I'm going to bring
issues
you
here.
in a second. Deji, give me a second. Deji, give me a second.
How then can anyone therefore go forward to say the group does not believe in the
Okay,
existence of the
so
country,
they went to the court. Okay,
or
fair
the
point.
Federation of Nigeria?
Fair point, Deji, fair point. Kayode, you can respond in a second, but
I
let
think
me
that-
ask you, hold on, Kayode, let me ask you, hold on,
yeah,
right? So
yeah.
Deji says more than 1,000. The government says 347 people killed. Now, what was interesting is at that time, even Human Rights Watch said the killings were wholly unjustified. Their words, not mine. And then you had a Judicial Commission of Inquiry into the killings that called for the general officer commanding the Army's 1st Division, Major General Adeniyi Oyebade, to be prosecuted, right? Because they said this was wrong, this was a massacre. With that in mind, doesn't
Look,
Deji have a point?
Yeah. I don't know what version Deji is listening to in this interview. This is clear. Maybe when he replays it, he will listen quite well. Look, even a massacre of 1 Nigerian is unjustified, not to talk of the killing of 1,000 people or 300 people. And a lot of us condemn extrajudicial killing. But the fact is, Deji should listen to it's not me saying this is what the group believes in. Ordinary Google search will tell you the Shia movement believes in an Islamic-style Islamic state in Nigeria. Nigeria is a secular state. You cannot impose any doctrine, whether you're Boko Haram, whether you're Sharia, whether you're Catholic, and these are separate issues. Yes, you can blame the government for mishandling the issue with Zakzaky. As a matter of fact, the killing of the Boko Haram leader led to where we are today, and this government should not take that same step. But you need to separate politics and identify this group that has violated the rights of Nigerians. They have blocked roads and refused communities to go about their normal business, but that does not justify the actions being taken by government. It is easy for us to actually say government has done wrong, but groups need to also be responsible. Where your right ends is where another person's right begin. They shot police officers guiding lawmakers. That is not the right way forward. I feel this government should negotiate with the group. They should release the leader or obey whatever laws or whatever judgment in court. I'm not really conversant with the pronouncements in the judiciary. But we have to recognize that this group has not done itself favors with the way it has gone about harassing innocent Nigerians, creating a kingdom for himself in Kaduna State, making life unbearable for people in Zaria. And you cannot separate that from what we're dealing with now.
Daniel, I want you to address something for us, because there is a claim from the group and the group's supporters and some who look at the situation and ask the question, well, can you only be an acceptable Muslim in Nigeria if you are Sunni Muslim, and if you're a Shia Muslim, that doesn't fly? Address that issue for me.
Right. So let me correct that notion. It is not correct assessment or it is not correct assertion. And like I told you, what the governor of Kaduna said, there are 3 types of Shia movement, Shia in Nigeria. The 2, apart from this one, the movement, the 2 are allowed to practice their theology of Shia, and there is no inhibition, there is no restriction, and there is no maltreatment of any sort on them. And like Kayode said, and I reiterate, the law recognizes the right of any person in Nigeria to worship whoever he wants to worship. But you must respect the constituted authority and the laws of the land. You can challenge authority, you can challenge the law by going to court. You are not allowed to resort to arms. You are not allowed to turn protest to violence, because doing so will mean that you are going against the law. And when you go against extant law, you will face the wrath of the law. Let me say for the obtained time, no killing of any citizen in Nigeria is justifiable under whatever guise, unless under the provision of the Constitution says, if in the act of suppressing insurrection, anything like that happens. And secondly, if a commission of inquiry comes out with any finding that indict the Nigerian army, they should face the wrath of the law. If Zakzaky's detention is against the order of the court, the government should respect the order of the court.
Okay.
That's what we're saying. But I am saying that when you want to look at it prospectively, and you want to look at the reason why he is detained, for example, I don't have available facts that the federal government has or the intelligence community have. So national security sometimes can be a reason, but if there is an order of court, the order of the court ought to be obeyed.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Deji, the army accuses this group of trying to assassinate the chief of army staff. Why don't you believe them?
That's a lie. You see, basically, it's about human rights. Almost all the arguments we have canvassed about human rights. Kayode and my other friend over in the studio, I forgot his name, they both know that there's no group in Nigeria that you kill 1,000 of their members that will be quiet. This group is one of the most peaceful groups in the history of this country. They're one of the most peaceful groups. We have in place a government that is lawless, that supports impunity, a tyrannical government that believes that the only way
Deji does not live in Nigeria. He probably lives. I live here in Abuja. Deji does not live in Nigeria.
Those that it considers as its critics or enemies. If not, how can you justify killing 1,000 people and you insist that they must not protest? Then this is a government that negotiates with terrorists. The killer Fulani headsmen, the government negotiates with them. The bandits that have killed hundreds and thousands of people in Zamfara. The Boko Haram that has killed over 40,000 people, this government negotiates with them. But when the Shiites protest on the street, they kill them.
Okay.
So how can anyone who has compassion in his heart, who is familiar with the doctrine of the rule of law, ever support a government like this? You find people justifying the actions
I think Deji has a problem with listening and comprehending people's comments and opinions.
Rights have been violated.
Gentlemen, I've got to jump in here. I'll tell you why I've got to jump in.
The Human Rights Watch has said rights have been violated.
Fair enough.
Amnesty International have said rights have been violated. The global community knows. America, look at the time that the army
Deji, I've got to jump in.
Killed Shiites. Then the army tweeted a video of Donald Trump to justify the killings.
Okay.
You can imagine
Deji, listen, I'm going to lose all your windows. Listen, Deji, I'm sorry, Deji. I'm really sorry. Listen,
Deji, is happening.
Deji, give me a second.
Different forms of justification.
Deji, I'm going to have to lower your audio. I'll tell you why. Daniel and Coyote's satellite windows are going to drop out any second now. So this is a good opportunity to wrap the discussion. Gentlemen, this has been a good introduction to this issue, and we will undoubtedly have more conversations about this. I thank you all for joining us on the Newsmakers. We've been looking at whether Nigeria has been discriminating against its religious minorities. Could the same be happening in Pakistan? More than 90% of the country is Muslim. But every year, thousands of Hindu and Christian girls are kidnapped, forced to marry, and then convert to Islam. This year, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan ordered an investigation into the case of 2 girls who were abducted and forced to become Muslim. But activists say that's not enough. Pakistan has no law banning forced conversions, and the number of victims has spiked in recent years. So is it time the government took more serious action? Well, let's go to Lahore, where I'm joined by Mehdi Hassan, He's the chairman of the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, and Fauzia Vikar, who was the chairwoman of the Punjab Commission on the Status of Women. Good to have you both on the program. Mahdi Hassan, how big is this problem of young Hindu and Christian girls being forced to convert?
Well, the problem in Pakistan is that this issue concerns directly with the democratic rights of the people. And in Pakistan, democracy is not possible because Pakistan is a religious state. Constitutionally, Pakistan is a religious state, and a religious state and democratic state, these are two different things. This is my personal opinion. This is not the policy of the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan. But I believe that a religious state can never be a democratic state. In Pakistan, the religious minority, they are facing many problems because of the influence of the religious might in Pakistan. The religious might, which is in minority but is influential in Pakistan, and the government, whenever an issue comes which is concerning religious feelings and religious matters, the decision of every government, not only this present government, but in the past also, the decision is always apologetic. And those decisions are not taken, they are not possible, which are required at the moment. So Pakistan is lacking in the democratic rights of the religious minorities.
So Fauzia,
As
when it
far
comes
as the case of
sir,
these-
okay, sorry to interrupt you, sir, because I want to get Fauzia's opinion here before I come back to you. If what Mahdi is saying is the reality on the ground, is it going to be impossible to do anything about this because, as he says, the religious right and that minority view, which is extremely influential, is always going to supersede the democratic rights and values and democratic responsibilities that come with the nation?
Yes.
Well, I'm just going to tie Dr. Mahdi Hassan's discussion with the whole issue of forced conversion as we had originally talked about. And I just want to say that this issue is more complex than meets the eye, and it affects women differently than men. Because if you look at the issue of forced conversion, women are predominantly the victims of forced conversions and then subsequently forced marriages also. It is absolutely related to democratic rights, but it is also related to discrimination based on class and gender. Even though our constitution gives rights to the religious minorities under Article 2A and Article 36, it is actually not practiced, especially for women, because if you look at how women are discriminated to begin with, you are automatically subjecting women to becoming more susceptible to forced conversions. They are poorer, their identity documents are not prepared, and subsequently if they report any form of coercion to state authorities, usually their complaints are disregarded. So I would say that it's important to look at how the issue impacts women among the religious communities disproportionately as compared to men, and relate it back to the issue of democratic rights of citizens.
Fauzia, when we look at the power dynamics, we see that when we look at each issue case by case, there's usually no help from the police, no recourse from the courts. With all of that in mind, with it seemingly being systemic, when the Prime Minister says he wants to tackle this issue and wants to do something about it, how does he then?
Well, like I said earlier, a very simplistic view of the whole issue of forced conversions is taking place. Because if the Prime Minister and the state institutions want to do something about it, they'll have to start to begin with at the time of the birth of a child, you know. Because if you look at the numbers, you'll see that the birth registration of girls is disproportionately lower than that of the boys. Similarly, if you go on to see the identity registration of the girls and boys, you will see that there is a disparity, considerable disparity. As a matter of fact, 10.2 million less identity registrations of the girls than they are of the boys. And then another factor that has to be taken into view is that there is a discrimination even in the age of marriage between girls and boys. So the way the age of majority and minority is taken, that varies. You know, the minimum age of marriage in Punjab, for instance, for a girl is 16, for a boy it is 18. Hence, more and more difficult to prove whether the issue of forced marriage is taking place or not.
Right.
The government wants to perhaps tackle it towards the end of it all, whereby any issue of conversion would be dealt with severely by the state authorities. But what about all the dynamics that go into it much beforehand?
Right.
Right.
Okay.
How are you going to prove that there was? Sorry.
Right. Okay. So this is interesting, right? So I want to ask Mehdi Hassan, how do you actually draw that line, and is it clear cut? So you might have, for example, a girl who comes from a very poor Christian family, who through a combination of aspiration, maybe coercion, maybe a mix of other things, ends up marrying a Muslim boy who has a higher standing in society. Who gets to decide whether this was an enforced marriage or not?
Well, as far as the case of these two Hindu girls converted to Islam and forced marriages because their family members had filed an application in the police station that these two girls were abducted and forced to marry two Muslim persons who were already married and who had children. One of them had 4 children and the other had 3 children. And their marriage was without the consent of the family of the girls. The Human Rights Commission of Pakistan conducted an investigation and found that many things are to be answered by the Supreme Court of, by the High Court of Islamabad. I had asked the Islamabad High Court to find out that what is the procedure of finding such volunteers who offer to marry such girls who are forced to convert to Islam, the Hindu girls or Christian girls or any other religious minorities, and who is responsible for issuing a certificate to the families of the converted girls. And number 2, while only girls are converted to Islam, why not boys who should convert to Islam and marry Muslim girls? These are the questions which has not been answered by any investigating team. So this is very important, and this shows that there is a discrimination and the religious might is asserting its policy of Islamic extremism.
Understood. Fauzia?
Yes.
Yes. My view on this? Yes. Again, I'd say this issue ties back to the whole issue of protection of the religious minorities of Pakistan. You know, we started off in 1947 when Pakistan was made. We started off with a far larger number of religious minorities. Today we are left with far less, especially when it comes to the Hindu community. There's been almost at one point a mass exodus of the Hindu community because of the coercion, because of the persecution that they felt. Now we are standing at about 4% Hindu community only, which is a much, much lower number than we started off with. So we have to protect our minorities, you know, whether it is a man or a woman, we have to protect our minorities. We have to ensure that their socioeconomic empowerment happens. There are efforts to promote their socioeconomic empowerments. And like Dr. Mehdi Hassan was saying, the power of the religious institutions, that has to be regulated so that there isn't an organized effort to convert people. In the example that was recently cited of the 2 sisters who were abducted, we saw that there was great efficiency in which the girls disappeared from the home, they were taken to a religious seminary, their conversion was formalized, and in no time they were married off. So there was institutional support to that. And when the parents went to the police was not as supportive. It is a good thing that the Islamabad High Court took the issue very seriously. But when they asked the question from the girls, you know, the question, as was said earlier, wasn't about, it was asked about whether they were forcibly converted. How the question of coercion is defined is what we are talking about.
Right.
Are they living in poorer circumstances? You know, is the luring of better future, I guess, get better living conditions, is that also a part of the whole systemic conversion that we are talking about?
Yeah, these are big questions and beyond the remit of a 10-minute discussion, and I think we need to delve into this deeper and wider. I'd love to invite you both back onto the program in the not too distant future. For the moment, I have to move on, but I'm very grateful that you decided to talk to us. Mehdi Hassan and Fawzia Viqar, thanks for joining us on the Newsmakers. That's all for this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. Check out more of our stories on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Remember to like, follow and subscribe. Next time, Donald Trump tweets more racist comments, but will aiming them at a group of outspoken congresswomen lead to actual consequences? Or is the US president immune? Until then, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.